Hi, welcome back to video 3 of this checkpoint overview, I guess we could call it. In this video we're going to look at the post-installation of Gaia, just maybe look at some basic checks we can do after the installation. In the last video we ended up with the completion of that Gaia installation and you should have been asked to do a reboot. If you go into the web UI now, you can use the same admin credentials once again and you should see a very different looking web UI compared to what you saw during the first time installation. So let's get into that. Once again we've gone to the 192.168.178.150, which is my checkpoint appliance or VM IP address. We'll put the username and password in. Okay, and as you can see we come up with a pretty-ish GUI. It's a lot prettier than it was in the old days, that's for sure. And we can straight away see some basic information. We are a checkpoint security gateway. We're running version R81.10, 64-bit edition, and the IP address assigned to it. I've got the loop back here as well. Some of you more eagle-eyed people may notice that there's something else missing here, which might be a problem a bit later on. And then on the left-hand side you can browse through different bits and pieces, like if you want to set up a DHCP server, you can enter host names. As you can see here, we've got a host name tied here. This obviously overrides anything that you're using DNS wise. So if you didn't have an entry for the hostname CPAIO, it would by default go and check the Google DNS. Instead we've explicitly said it's on this IP. Google would never respond with a response for this, but it doesn't matter whether Google does or not because it's explicitly in here. In here you can see your routing, and we've got just our default route here at the moment, which is actually wrong. I double checked during the break, so if I edit this, do edit again, and this should be .1. And yeah, it's really simple to change your IP addresses like that. Again, with network interfaces, same kind of scenario. It's obviously giving that warning there that we're connected to this one, so I'm not actually going to modify it. And then under here you can set your link speeds, etc. Auto negotiate, dependent obviously on what's on your switch end. Probably wouldn't be messing around with this unless you've got a really good reason to. And you can also put a comment in here, we could say primary link, something along those lines, if you want to. So that's that. What else is probably important? Proxy. If you're not directly connected out to the internet, you're probably going to be going through a proxy. And this is mainly used for things like pulling down updates from Checkpoint. So you'd want to stick a proxy IP address in there in the port. Not an issue in this scenario. Time and date we kind of covered in the previous video. Mine's currently set to manual. You can go under here, modify your NTP or modify the manually set date time. Cloning group it's designed to use when you've got a cluster, HA again, which we haven't got in use here. I'm not going to cover it right now. So yeah, that could be looked at later. SNMP, a really important piece of the, well, not just Checkpoint but any networking or any system architecture really that does support it. This is our key to not sitting around all day staring at it basically. If there's a problem, we want it to be detected for us and we want to be informed about it. And through SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, we can utilize it to do that on our behalf and get alerts and generate other responses. So yeah, if you're not aware of SNMP, I may cover it in more detail later on, but certainly become familiar with it. There's a lot of free platforms out there that do SNMP so that you can get comfortable with it, but yeah, really important. Job scheduler, this is to essentially run scripts that exist on the devices. Probably not something we're going to be getting too much into, but for those familiar with Linux, it's important to note that instead of using the cron, you set the jobs up through here. Mail notification, I've never really used, never seen a meaning to, but yeah, it's going to generate mail notifications, messages. These are message of the day for when you first log in. You know, people might set something like, well, what's here? You know, I've seen authorized users only. I've also seen some more crude messages that tell people that they may get shot if they're not authorized to the system, but I'll leave that as is. We'll discard that for now. Again, general stuff. I mean, yeah, this is important as well. Inactivity. Obviously, you don't want too long a time being left for you know you walk away from your screen, and you know someone who's not authorized to be on these devices now has access. It could be a work colleague. It could be an authorized third party who's on site with you, and now they've got access to your firewall and can essentially mess around with it to free will. So this is important. Yeah, this will minimize or extend the amount of time you want this. You want the logins to continue. Obviously, command line or the web UI. For the command line, it can be important at times to increase that command line shell. There's often issues during kind of things like upgrades. This used to be a more historic thing in fairness, but yeah, it does occur from time to time. You might want to increase this, I don't know, 30 minutes, 60 minutes just during those periods, and then drop it back down to something much lower, dependent on your kind of company regulation. Crash data, again, if you're familiar with most operating systems, with Linux it generates core dump into this location. These are user mode core dumps, not the kernel ones, but yeah, this generally doesn't get touched, but it's there if things need to be changed. System config allows IPv6, not something I touch very much. So this is syslog, and again, quite important if you do have a syslog server or some sort of SIEM type environment, you can use the settings here and log it elsewhere into the syslog. Also, importantly, there's other functions, as I mentioned, to send things to the SIEM, but something to get into later. Network access, yeah, we're not going to be enabling telnet for some reason. If you're not sure why, please look that up. Certificate authority, so yeah, this one again we can cover a bit more later, but ultimately Checkpoint uses certificates and it has its own certificate authority, and that's how it goes about validating whether devices are part of its system. It uses something called secure internal communication. So yeah, it's an important part, but often just a background function. Just know it's there. It often doesn't become a major issue until it becomes a major issue, if that makes sense. Then we've got host access. So this is what I spoke about in the prior video, where we can restrict which hosts can access. This is directly on the device rather than through the policy, as I mentioned. So we can go in here and same things apply. At the minute, obviously, we're set to any IP address still. LLDP, not really needed most of the time on Checkpoint unless you're working with the Maestro devices. We're not going to cover Maestro here, so LLDP I'm going to go straight past. DHCP relay, for those familiar, it's to allow a DHCP server that's not in the same network to be accessible to devices through the firewall. You can't send DHCP requests through a firewall normally, similar to a router. It works at layer 3, so this acts as like a proxy function essentially to allow a device in one network or one network segment that's different to where it needs to receive its DHCP reply from to hop over through what is essentially a layer 3 boundary. Again, not really covering this in too much detail, something to look up yourself, or if you want a video on that, please let me know. BGP, Border Gateway Protocol, again, routing, dynamic routing, fully supported. IGMP, I've never used it in my entire life. I'm sure someone uses it, which is why it's here, but yeah, not really used. Again, never use IP broadcast helper. I'm guessing it's something similar to the DHCP relay piece. More detail there, but it's not something that I use day to day, or expect most people will use day to day. PIM, again, I feel like I've probably used this at some point in the past. It's not something I use day to day though. And same with the static multicast routes. RIP, very, very old routing protocol at this point, generally non-existent across most networks. There are definitely still networks out there using it. It's not advised. If you're using RIP, good luck. Really shouldn't be using it in this day and age. It's currently 2025 when this is going out, so yeah, maybe try and move away from RIP to something like OSPF. It's just, yeah, it's old and not fantastic now. IP reachability detection. This is kind of similar to what would be known as IPSLA, where you do forms of testing availability for links. And what I mean by that is, let's say you've got 2 ISP lines, for example, and you want to test the availability of each line, and which if one of them was to die, the other route would become the preferred ISP of the one which has gone down, and we can use kind of a ping test through this to do that. It's also used, as you can see here, for BFD as well, which is more BGP related. Again, read up on these things. I'm not going to cover them directly today, or it might be something I'll cover later on, but it's not really also my forte, shall we say. It's not something I do every day, but yeah. So IPsec routing, never actually use this particular function. It's not, VPNs are obviously a key part of using Checkpoint, but adding a manual IPsec association like this is not something I can say I've ever done or ever seen the need to. I'm sure it's there for a reason, but isn't generally used. OSPF, if you're not familiar with OSPF, you're probably not familiar with dynamic routing. Again, it's kind of the standard, industry standard routing style that's used. Checkpoint supports it. Route aggregation, again, it's more routing related stuff, but never actually had to use this. I know what route aggregation is, in terms of it's aggregating multiple smaller subnets into one wider subnet, but I've never had to use this in the Checkpoint. The inbound route filters, as you can see, used with OSPF, can be used with RIP, and can also be used with BGP to filter out what routes you take in from the routing protocols. Route redistribution, again, you can filter, say, from statics into OSPF, OSPF into BGP, BGP, and so on and so forth. Look at routing options. Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I probably will cover this later on in more detail, mainly to do with the protocol rank. Checkpoint has a different protocol rank to Cisco, for example, but protocol rank is essentially administration distance. What's more believable? Which route would end up preferably in the routing table between, or rather, if multiple route destinations are known via multiple protocols, would it be OSPF over BGP? Is it going to be static over BGP? Is it going to be static over OSPF? Is it going to be etc, etc again? Route to discovery. Yeah, again, something I've never used, never really needed to. Read up on it if you have interest. Policy-based routing, this one is not used every day, but certainly has its place. And I will go into this in more detail. But essentially, instead of using the main routing table for a destination, you can get much more granular here. As you can see, you may be going to put a specific source IP address, a specific destination IP, both a specific service port, as in, you know, a TCP or UDP port, and then we take an action, and that action is a next hop essentially. So yeah, a very powerful tool to have, not used as the main routing table, but more used for specific scenarios. Comes with its own quirks. Yeah, definitely needs a video by itself probably to look at. NAT pools. Yeah, I think this is a more recent thing. The only place that I know of that these are used on a day-to-day basis is you can use them for redistributing into dynamic protocols. Specifically, we've used it with BGP. So again, probably will do a video that involves BGP, at least at a basic level, and we'll probably try and add some NAT pools in there for the sake of that. And then this actually is like the dynamic route monitor, and what I mean by that is you can use this to see what BGP routes are there, what RIP routes are there, etc, etc. Obviously we've got show all. Direct meaning this is on an interface or is a loopback. So yeah, this one's directly connected. Obviously we are on the 192.168.178/24 network, and that's hanging off of ETH0. I obviously added that comment of primary link. We've got user management, should be straightforward. Changing password, all the available users. By default you've got the admin and this monitor one. It's a less permissive account essentially. Never used it, never had reason to. Roles, we've got the admin role, which is everything. Cloning admin is used along with that cloning group mentioned further up, which is related to HA clustering. Monitor role, again, not really used. So yeah, you can get much more granular with these roles and create your own role. It's not something like doing too much, but the functions are there. Generally, if you've got CLI access, you probably should have an idea of what you're doing, and having to reduce it down, it is, yeah, maybe not the greatest thing in the world, but it obviously does have its place, and the functionality is there to do so. Password policy, again, can be quite important, especially from a security perspective, to tick those audit boxes. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's there. You can change the history length and things like that, so feel free to look at that to meet your company's policy. Support for radius and TACACS, if you know kind of thing. These are remote login protocols. You can forward your login request via radius server or TACACS server as you see fit. System groups, these are more Linuxy, I guess, bits and pieces. Never had to play with these. I don't think most people ever will. GUI clients. So this is actually separate to the host access we saw, which was further up here. This one. This is for CLI and web UI access, the host access. Whereas the GUI clients, we use this for accessing Checkpoint Smart Console, which we'll see later on. Okay, high availability clustering. So we've got VRRP, or we've got cluster. VRRP is very rarely used these days. Usually we use something called SecureXL. We use ClusterXL. SecureXL is another piece for acceleration, which we'll cover later. But yeah, VRRP is used quite commonly for most other vendors, but Checkpoint have their proprietary ClusterXL, which is the preferred version. I can only think of kind of one customer that I work with on a somewhat regular basis that uses VRRP in this day. There's also now something called ElasticXL, which is a very different form of clustering, shall we say, to the point that it's arguably not even clustering, but does the same functions, just better in reality. But yeah, so VRRP, ClusterXL are the clustering functions. And we'll get into the bottom really, the licenses. Obviously here we're running an eval because this is a freshly built device. We've got snapshots, important. You want to do regular snapshots in case you have any issues with the system, unexpected issues. You want to be able to roll back. Likewise, backups, regular backups, arguably daily. Take them off the box. You can sorry, not restore, but you can export remotely. You can do it on a scheduled basis. You've got these options here. get it done. It's you know, I can't count on one hand, unfortunately. Probably can't count on two. The amount of times where we've had customers contact us with major issues, system failures, and they don't have a system backup. For customers that kind of the company I work with manage, we do that as part of our service anyway. Everyone should be doing system backups. It's just not even an argument to not do this. It's really important that you get this done. I'll come to that next. Shutdown, we can do a full reboot or a halt of the system, which would be a shutdown. Reboot obviously being a reboot. Then you've got the upgrades. At the minute, we're not gonna, well, I say upgrades, but there's something called jumbo hotfixes as well, which are like mini patches, but important patches. At the minute, we need a valid license for this, which we'll tackle in a minute. But yes, on that, on that first install with the trial license, you cannot do any upgrades or patching or anything like that. And then this is just a policy, which how often does it check for updates and other things like that. Again, doesn't tend to get touched too much in the real world. And then we have download smart console. So this is realistically the first place you're likely to go after a first time wizard. Yep, even after all of this, if you've put all of your details correctly during the build, this is the most likely place that you're going to end up going. I'm going to hit the download here. And we can run the installation for this. This one does take quite some time. It's again a next scenario. And yeah, we'll go through that in the next video. So yeah, hope this was informative for you. I'll probably look at that outside of the video, but interesting little area we've got there. But yeah, see you in the next one.